What it do? Artem crew. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down every single fight that I think should happen after UFC 317, including the winners and the losers of nearly every single fight on this card. And honestly, I think that there are some pretty fun matchups to be made next. I am completely just copying Bedtime MMA's entire thing by making a slideshow, but I did think that it was probably a good way to put it all together. So hopefully Bedtime MMA doesn't mind me just completely stealing his whole thing. But me and Bedtime, we're pretty close, I think. I haven't talked to him in a minute, but I don't think he'll be too mad about me just completely stealing his entire idea. So shout out to Bedtime. Let's get into it. Ilia Topuria did beat Charles Oliveira, of course, tonight at UFC 317. He knocked him out in the first round. It was pretty sad. I'm relatively sad about it. I think a lot of people probably are too. However, I think for Topuria, I think that this next move is going to be interesting because I feel like there's like multiple different guys you could go with. Yes, they did the face-off with Paddy Pimblett. Dana White wasn't happy about that. I'm going to guess it's not going to happen. But don't worry, I do have a fight planned for Pimblett later on. So it's all going to be all good in the end, and we should get that fight eventually. Arman Tsarukyan was the backup. He weighed in as the backup for this fight. I think that kind of logically that makes sense. Dana White kind of hinted that Arman Tsarukyan missed weight against Makhachev, which is interesting when Renato Moicano stepped up on short notice. But aside from that as well, you could do Gaethje, but once again, Dana White said in the press conference that he is not very happy with Justin Gaethje saying that if he doesn't get a title shot, he's going to retire. So I'm kind of gone with Tsarukyan. I think it's more the logical choice, and I think that's kind of a fight which Topuria would struggle with because I think that stylistically Tsarukyan is a tough matchup for Ilia Topuria. But I feel like, honestly, at 155 right now, I think Topuria is the guy to beat, and I think he's going to be very, very tough to beat. Now we've got Charles Oliveira here, the man who unfortunately did just suffer the knockout loss to Ilia Topuria. I think Oliveira still has a lot of potential to put on fun fights. It's just sad now that he is 35 years old and maybe 8 months now, I think. He's going to be 36 years old the next time he steps into that cage, and it's probably going to be 5, 6, 7 months away, maybe even longer, just given the fact that he was knocked out somewhat brutally, which is pretty sad to see at this point in his career. I feel like Oliveira is going to retire soon, and Max Holloway, speaking of retirements, is fighting Poirier in Poirier's retirement fight. Call me crazy, I feel like this could be Oliveira's retirement fight as well against Max Holloway, so we'd be fighting back-to-back retirees, which would be quite funny. However, I do think this fight does make sense. It's got some history to it. Of course, Holloway, very, very early on in both of these guys' careers, did get a win over Charles Oliveira. I think it was like UFC Fight Night 74 or something like that. It was a long time ago anyways. It's got some history to it. If things played out a little bit differently in the lightweight division, maybe Oliveira versus Holloway could have happened for the lightweight title at some point, but this is what we've got now. I think this is a fun fight, and I think genuinely, depending on how Holloway looks against Poirier, probably depends on what I think I would predict the outcome for this fight to be. But I think for now, I would still side with Olives. You know, I still think he's got a little bit left in him. But Holloway, he looked good against Gaethje at 155. Could potentially win this matchup too, and maybe knock out Olives as well, whose chin at this point might be a little bit flaky. And now we've got my plan for Paddy Pimblett. Yes, Paddy Pimblett did face off against Ilia Topuria. However, Dana White wasn't happy about that. He didn't really want to do Pimblett versus Topuria next. I think Pimblett versus Topuria is an obvious fight to make at some point. These two do not like each other. I believe it was Topuria that threw the hand sanitizer at Topuria, or maybe it was the other way around, at Pimblett, I mean. But you guys know what I mean. These guys have been beefing with each other ever since UFC London when Jai Herbert got knocked out by Topuria. It's been a very long time now, and I feel like it's a fight to make. However, I don't think you can just justify giving Pimblett a title shot right now. He's ranked number 8. His best win is over Michael Chandler, and then before that he beat, of course, Bobby Green. But if you give him Dan Hooker, who's ranked number 6 right now, on a 3-fight win streak as well, and he beats Dan Hooker, in that case, I think you can just justify giving Pimblett a title shot against Ilia Topuria, and I think this is honestly a pretty winnable matchup for Pimblett as well. Now, Dan Hooker's still a tough guy to beat. I mean, Dan Hooker just beat Mateus Gamrot, who arguably is similar stylistically to Pimblett, but not really. You guys know what I mean. I think Dan Hooker, if he was to win, then I think in that case you can probably give him Gaethje or Oliveira. But I feel like if Pimblett won, perfect opportunity to give him Ilia Topuria, sorry. Now, Alexandre Pantoja versus Joshua Van. Obvious fight to make. Confirmed before the fight between Van and Royval even took place. Van just took a relatively close decision over Brandon Royval, which in my opinion he got based on the third round knockdown, which really stole him the fight. And he looked good, man. The thing about Van, though, is he did take a bit of damage. He did take that fight on short notice. He's fought twice now in the span of about a month. Apparently, he's got a broken toe. Van is next for Pantoja. There's no doubt about that. But if Van does have a broken toe, and the fact that he did take damage in his fight against Royval, and he did take some damage against Silva too, Van needs time off. I think you give Van, I would like to see this fight soon. Maybe at the soonest, December is what I'm thinking. At the end of the year, pay-per-view at the end of the year. Co-main event. Personally, still though, I just don't really see anyone beating Alexandre Pantoja. I feel like this fight could look quite interesting if it got extended into the later rounds, but I still think Pantoja can get the takedowns on Joshua Van. I think that Van, though, with his boxing heavy style, and I think maybe the fact that he also does kind of throw with like a lot more tight shots than Kai Kara France will give a better performance than Kai Kara France did. But I still think that Pantoja, man, just with that pressure heavy style, with that wrestling heavy style, I do think that he would defeat Joshua Van in this fight, which I think should happen. And I think that this could honestly be the co-main event to Ilia Topuria versus whoever he fights, maybe in December, or the co-main events to Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes, because this is a big fight. I don't think it's big enough to headline its own pay-per-view, but co-main event of a really important pay-per-view, I think it's absolutely perfect. I love this matchup. Very, very happy for Pantoja getting a fresh matchup, and very happy for Joshua Van getting the opportunity now to get a title for Myanmar, as well as be a very, very young champion if he can win against one of the greats now of the sport, Alexandre Pantoja. Now, the man that come up short was Kai Kara France. I think that he should be fighting against Kai Asakura next. I think this is an awesome, awesome fight. Kai Kara France, I think, puts on some of the more exciting matchups at flyweight against strikers. Against grapplers, we have seen Kai Kara France fumble a little bit in the past. I mean, the Amir Albazi fight was close, but Kai Kara France, in my opinion, won, but he lost it on the scorecards. And then, of course, he has lost as well to other wrestlers recently, including Alexandre Pantoja, who just had a massive, massive performance. I think this is an opportunity for Kai Kara France to have a big performance against another striker. Kai Asakura is absolutely massive, 125 pounds, and he hits very, very hard. So both of these guys are rare knockout artists at 125 pounds, and I think this is a banger. Kai Asakura has a fight against Tim Elliott coming up, I believe, on the next pay-per-view, if not the pay-per-view after that. And I think Kai Kara France, he's relatively old now. I think he's 32 years old at flyweight. If he's going to get another title shot opportunity, he's going to need to be active. So maybe he wants to fight sooner than when Asakura is ready, but I honestly think that if this fight happens, banger. And if Tim Elliott somehow beats Asakura, Elliott versus Kara France could be fun too, because they're both absolute veterans of the sport, and we're on the same Ultimate Fighter Season 2. Now, Brandon Royval, he did come up short against Joshua Van. I think that he should fight against Kyoji Horiguchi. I know the original matchup for Brandon Royval was against Manel Karp, but you could rebook because that would be really fun. But Kyoji Horiguchi's coming in at 125 pounds, and Alexandre Pantoja has named Kyoji Horiguchi as somebody that he wants to fight against. So I feel like if you give Kyoji Horiguchi Brandon Royval and he can somehow beat Brandon Royval, I think you can justify a title shot for Kyoji Horiguchi against Alexandre Pantoja. Pantoja wants to fight Kyoji Horiguchi. He's already beaten Royval a couple of times, but Royval still was the #1 contender. He's still going to be in the top 4, probably the top 5, honestly, by the time this fight ever rolls around. Horiguchi did have a fight booked, but I think he pulled out at some point. I believe it was it against Albazi? I could be incorrect about that, but let me know in the comments below. I think this is good. The problem with this matchup, though, I will put this out there, the timing is bad. Royval is going to want to take time off because he did take a lot of damage against Van. He got knocked out arguably in the third round too. So maybe the timing doesn't work out. In that case, I guess you would just book Royval against a Karp, or even do Karp versus Horiguchi. But I like this fight. The main reason for it is because Kyoji Horiguchi was named by Pantoja as someone that he wants to fight against. So I think if you can give him the opportunity, you do it. Dariush, he looked slow, he looked old. I think you just give him a prospect at lightweight that can take advantage of that. I know he beat Moicano, who's pretty tough and was on a win streak before he lost to Islam Makhachev, I should say. But you know, he just looked slow and he looked old. So I think you give him Grant Dawson. If Grant Dawson can out wrestle sorry, Grant Dawson is way back in there with the prospects at 155 pounds. And I actually think that right now, I think I would pick Grant Dawson to beat Dariush. Renato Moicano versus Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler seems like the kind of guy that only really wants to take on the big names. And Renato Moicano, I think, has made a name for himself. I think that this is a fight which, honestly, you probably could still justify putting on a pay-per-view. At this point, both guys are at the end of their careers. Moicano's 36 years old. Chandler, I think, is even older than that now, and he's getting pretty there. He's lost a lot of fights in a row, has Chandler. I think Chandler genuinely could look at this matchup as a winnable fight for him. And for Moicano, I think you could probably say the same thing. So I think this is a fight that makes sense. I think you can put it on a pay-per-view card. And I think that a lot of people would get excited about this matchup. I think it's a matchup that makes sense in the lightweight division. Payton Talbot called out Adrian Yanez. Adrian Yanez, honestly, is the guy that every striker at bantamweight calls out to get an easy win. And I think it makes sense. I think Talbot on the feet versus Yanez would be awesome. I think Yanez could actually potentially expose some of the holes that Talbot has in his own striking game, such as pretty bad striking defense. I do know that he does dodge shots very well, but he just doesn't move his head. And Yanez is a very sick boxer. I think this would be a banger. I think this is a fight that does make sense. I would like to see Talbot versus Yanez, and I think it does make for a fun fight. I think Talbot would win, though, to be honest with you, but if Yanez knocked him out, I wouldn't be that surprised because Yanez is tricky, but I think the obvious pick in this fight would be to pick Payton Talbot to get another win. The man that lost to Talbot is Felipe Lima. Sohei City is also 2-1 in the bantamweight division in the UFC. Lima come up just short against Talbot. Gave a relatively good but somewhat bad performance as well at the same time. I think City also 2-1 in the promotion. Lima 2-1 in the promotion, dropping back down to bantamweight. I think this makes sense. Lima didn't really seem like he took that much damage. I think City fought somewhat recently. I think it makes sense, and I think it's a fight that would be pretty entertaining on like the prelims of some sort of pay-per-view, you know what I mean? Gregory Rodriguez got a brutal knockout win over Jack Hermansson. Both of him and Hermansson were not ranked at the time. I don't understand how Rodriguez managed to lose his ranking position at 185 pounds, but he did. And the man that is ranked number 15 right now in the UFC middleweight division that also got a win recently and probably is looking for a fight about this time is Abus Magomedov. So I think you do Gregory Rodriguez versus Abus Magomedov. When you're looking at the rankings, you've got to kind of look at guys that aren't booked. I think Rodriguez versus Vettori would be fun, but Vettori's pretty notoriously hard to work with. Reina Dorita has a fight booked against Whitaker. I think that there are some maybe other matchups that make more sense, but I feel like Rodriguez versus Magomedov is a matchup that does make sense to me. Now, Jose Delgado absolutely waxed Hyder Emil in the best performance of his career. And there's someone else out there that is also on a bit of a win streak now, Malcazal Costa, 5-2 in the promotion, a veteran of the sport now at this point, despite being pretty young, 31 professional fights. I think that this is a test to see how good Delgado really is, because Delgado is a guy that mixes in the striking with the wrestling pretty well, and Costa does the same thing. So if Delgado can beat Malcazal Costa at this point in his career, I think that Delgado is a guy that you can keep your eye out for like being a very, very good prospect. Or you could just give Delgado Andre Fili maybe to see where he's at. But I think that just given the fact that he was able to knock out Hyder Emil in 26 seconds, why not test him against someone that's got a bit more veteran experience, such as Malcazal Costa? As for Hyder Emil, I gave him Joe Anderson Brito. Joe Anderson Brito is on a losing streak at the moment and also likes to stand and bang. I think that this would be a prelims of a pay-per-view card every single day of the week. This is also where I got lazy making a slideshow, so it's just text from now on, but banger. Banger, banger. I think Brito probably would actually get one back and lose that and snap that losing streak that he's on now. Tracy Cortez versus Macy Barber. As I said in my review, I was playing Clash of Clans during Tracy Cortez's fight against Viviane Araujo, so I'm not actually that sure how she looked, but she won 30-27, I believe, on all three scorecards, and Macy Barber was meant to fight Erin Blanchfield in the main event, pulled out. Co-main event of an Apex fight night, maybe a main event if it's like the worst Apex card on the absolute planet, but please, please no more. Please, please a co-main event. Please. Terrence McKinney versus Michael Johnson. Johnson does have a fight booked for a couple of months away, and McKinney took no damage whatsoever. He probably does want to fight soon. Him versus Mason Jones would be a banger, but I honestly just feel like Johnson versus McKinney would be perfect. Like, I really love the idea of that matchup for some reason. I think Johnson would test him in some ways. Or Terrence McKinney versus Mason Jones would also be absolutely epic. I would love that fight if it was to happen. Jacoby Smith, he won. He won in the second round. I've got him versus Austin Vanderford. Vanderford's 1-0 in the UFC. Smith is 2-0 in the UFC. Vanderford's pretty old. Doesn't really seem like the kind of guy that's going to have that much leverage to say no to Jacoby Smith, because I think that that's probably a problem that they're going to have with him, is actually just finding him opponents. I know that given that this performance wasn't that impressive could maybe help that, but I do know like guys like Malcolm Wellmaker really struggle to find opponents. Maybe Smith is going to do the same problem. I feel like Vanderford's the kind of guy, he's pretty old, you know. I feel like he's the kind of guy that you can just call up and get Smith to fight. And Vanderford's good as well, like a lot of Bellator experience. Beat Nikolai Veretennikov relatively soundly, pretty good. He's a good wrestler. He's going to test Smith in the wrestling department. He's really big for the division too. Going to test Smith in the size department, I guess, of welterweight, because Smith is a small welterweight. This is just a test for Smith. I feel like the thing without Smith is like maybe you could just try and build up his record and absolute can crush his way, but he seems like the kind of like prospect that you want to build. And I think that's the end, right? That's the end. All right, that's the end of the slideshow. That's the end of the video. With that being said, guys, I will see you guys in the next one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that little slideshow. Bit of time out. I'll see you guys in my predictions for the next card.